Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next episode of Rock the Closing. Today, we are going to talk about what is happening after the contract is signed and before the closing. We are recording this episode a week before Thanksgiving, and this is the time when mostly our clients are getting anxious and they all start to come with the question, when can we close? When can we close? Because we really want to close before the holidays. So we were thinking today with Dalia that why not dedicate today's show about to explain what is happening in the really lengthy time that we have between the contract signing and closing, what is going on during this time period, and what does it take to arrive at the closing table? So let's dive in. Dalia, when you represent a buyer, what happens on the day you receive back the fully executed or otherwise signed contract? So we have a binding executed contract. What is it that you do on that day that you receive the document back?
Celia, this is a great topic for this time of year because it's really relevant because it's true. Like you said, everyone's trying to get their closing in before the holidays. Thanksgiving's coming up, but you definitely don't want to spend Christmas week moving. So it's kind of time sensitive. So absolutely, when I get back a fully executed contract, for my buyer, I'm always really relieved, and I know they are too, because I know they're waiting for it and asking for it. So what I'll do is I'll usually send them an email, and I'll include in there the fully executed contract because I want everyone to have that. A lot of other people need to have it, so everyone should have it in their inbox. And I'll also just use that email as an opportunity to explain to my client what the next steps are and outline various deadlines, because that is the biggest question for them. They want to know, what's next for me? What do I do now? What happens now? Who's supposed to be doing things now? Because it's just the start of something, right? So I will outline for them the steps that they need to take. Everyone's got their job and they have a job too. So I'm going to need them to submit their mortgage application as soon as possible. They may have already started this process with their mortgage broker or their bank, but we need to really press the gas on that now that we have a fully executed contract. If they're purchasing a home, let's say in Long Island, Westchester, outer boroughs, there might be an option to conduct a termite inspection. Now's the time to call and schedule that. If they're purchasing in the city or somewhere where they're getting a co-op unit, then there's going to be a deadline to submit the purchase application to the board. So as an attorney representing buyers, I will be ordering title searches, right? So if it's going to be for a house or a condo, I'm going to order the title search. If they're purchasing a co-op, I'll be ordering the lien search report. So I definitely want to be doing that the day I get the fully executed contract back, because if there are any issues, anything that needs to be addressed, I want to know yesterday. Okay. We did speak about this at length in one of our previous episodes regarding title, so I won't get too much into that. But these reports will reveal the title history, whether if you have a house, if there are any encumbrances against the parties involved in the transaction, bankruptcy searches, all kinds of searches that are done, anything that may be attached to the property, just all that stuff. I definitely want to get that started as soon as possible because various searches take varying lengths of time. They don't all come back within 3 days. Some of them take longer. Some of them, I'm going to need some time to work things out, right? So that's going to be my job on the day that I get back a fully executed contract, Arcelia. Do you have anything to add? Am I missing anything? What can you think of?
No. It's absolutely perfect what you said, but I just also wanted to add very briefly, like what happens on the day the contract is executed when you represent a seller. You will be on a more of a responsive side, meaning that you will be waiting. You will wait for that title report or lien search report, which is ordered by the buyer's attorney. And when it comes in, it's also received by the seller's attorney. And and there might be issues that the seller will have to address. So respond to the title report and get certain documents ready, or any issues that may come up will have to be discussed with the seller. Also, another issue that the seller may have to do will be working with the buyer's lender during this period. So when you represent the seller, and to keep in mind for sellers, while it is more of a waiting time for them, there might be certain instances and circumstances when they will have to work together with the buyer's attorney to secure and to address certain issues, either coming up from the title, from the lender, or co-op condo board. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for adding that in. So important. And we just briefly touched on that, the fact that the buyers have to get that mortgage process, that mortgage application going. Can you talk a little bit more about what that entails for the buyers? And then what is our role as buyers' attorneys in that process?
Sure. So many buyers take out a mortgage, and there will be a contractual obligation in terms of when to apply for that mortgage. The buyer will be able only to apply for the mortgage when they have the fully executed signed contract in their hands. So most contracts will have a paragraph addressing the timeline. Some will just say that after the contract is signed, the buyer is required to apply for a mortgage promptly. Some other contracts will define a timeline. I have seen 3 days to 5 days timeline. So after signing the contract, the buyer has to submit a mortgage application within 3 or 5 days. So that's how the process is starting. But believe it or not, some clients, although they are working with a mortgage broker, by the time we sign the contract, they may not have a lender. They may not have identified a lender. So some buyers will just, we sign the contract, but after the contract is signed, so we are really making sure that the transaction is going forward and going into the next phase. That's when some of my clients will be just deciding, okay, I'm going with this bank or that bank. So that might be the first thought of a client. However, many clients are prepared even before contract signing, that once the contract is signed, I know exactly which bank I'm going to go with, and I'm submitting my application. So the first step is submitting the application and obviously adding the fully executed contract. That is launching the process in terms of applying. Then what happens is that the lender is going to review the documents submitted by the buyer, by the prospective buyer, and then the lender is going to start to work on securing the mortgage, negotiating the best possible rates and obligations of the buyer, obligations of the lender. We usually not participating in that process, representing the buyer. However, there might be documents that we are required to submit. In addition to that, the lender is going to do also a due diligence with regards to the property that the buyer is purchasing. They will look into a house. They might require a survey. They will definitely send out an appraisal who will come back and compare the purchase price that is on the contract and based on the appraisal's findings. And the lender definitely communicating with the building. If the buyer is purchasing an apartment, either in a co-op or a condo, they usually have a lender's questionnaire, or they will be reviewing the building's documents. So all that. So one, the lender is reviewing the buyer, his person, and his financial strengths. On the other hand, the lender will be reviewing the property that the buying is taking the mortgage out against. So and then these two components come together, and usually as a result, if the lender is satisfied, a loan commitment letter is issued, hopefully, which allows the transaction to move into the next phase. This is usually taking 30 to 45 days. And the role of an attorney who is representing the buyer is to work with the lender together. If you are representing a seller, it's the same commitment. You might have to work with the buyer's attorney to provide some documents that the lender is requiring, but mainly as a seller's attorney. And in the shoes of the seller, you will be just waiting for the loan commitment letter because contracts are contingent on the lender issuing a loan commitment letter. So it wasn't as short as I wanted to be, but hopefully it was useful information. But let's move on. Let's say, what is happening when we have the loan commitment letter? Are we ready to close, Dalia?
We are almost ready to close, like just about. So we're getting to the finish line. Getting a loan commitment letter is a huge deal. Like you just said, it is going to be in the contract. There's going to be a set number of days in which you have to get a loan commitment letter. And once you do, that's great news. You are bound to the contract at this point, and you will have to provide that to the seller's attorney. You definitely want to let them know, here's my loan commitment letter. We're just about ready to start getting ready for closing. And it's probably in your contract that it has to be provided to them within a certain amount of time anyway. So you want to get it to them so they know as well that you can buy the property, because they're going to be waiting for that. Sellers get a little nervous that what if you don't get approved for a loan? We've waited all this time, 30 to 45 days, and you haven't been approved. So it's a big relief to everyone once you have the loan commitment letter. So once you have that, now we're going to send that around. The bank is going to be sending that to their lender's attorney. They're going to choose their bank attorney, and the lender's attorney is going to use that and try to finalize, like, what else do they need, right? Before we get to the closing table, the bank attorney is going to have to prepare a CD, provide some extra checks, extra documents. Maybe they need, a more recent pay stub, or they need your home insurance declaration for the new purchase, right? Whatever that is. The title company at this point should be done with the title search, and hopefully they are clearing up and resolving or getting any affidavits that they need to finalize for closing. And once we have all that, we will schedule it. That's for if you have a house. Now, if you are purchasing a condo, after you get the loan commitment letter, now you need to have the purchase application submitted to the building so that you can obtain a letter of rights of first refusal. So this is a letter which lets everyone know that the building had an opportunity to purchase this condo first, and they declined to purchase the unit, which gives you the right to purchase it. So that's really important. Stick it in the file. There it is. We have it, and we're all set to close on a condo. As for a purchase of a co-op, the purchase application needs to be submitted to the management company. They will review it. There's a whole package. Sometimes you might want to complete that as a buyer with your sales agent. Maybe it's really short and simple. You can complete it yourselves. I know some of my clients send it to me and ask me to look at it with them. If it looks a little complicated or they're a little nervous that they're going to not put something down correctly, once you complete the package, it gets submitted to the board for review. Hopefully everything's fine. If it's not, I usually hear about it. We need a little more information about that. They left this blank, whatever the case is. Once it's completed, then your interview is scheduled for the co-op. And hopefully you have a great time with that and you do really well. And that's really it. Not really been an issue for me, anyone getting rejected at an interview or anything. But it is part of the process, so it's really important we get that scheduled as well so that we are ready to close on that co-op. Marcelia, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I always have something to add when we are talking about co-ops. I think we should also record about co-ops interviews, some tips, how clients can prepare for that, because that's really one important aspect of real estate transactions, especially in New York City. But regarding what we are talking today, more of like the timeline, as you mentioned, usually with the house and the co-op, scheduling after you have a clearance is quite easy and simple. In terms of co-op, I just wanted to, again, add my voice that scheduling a co-op board interview might take some time, meaning that some boards are very much prepared to provide an interview date for the incoming new buyer. and they might be scheduling it really promptly within a week or 2 weeks after they receive the package from the management companies. But in some other instances, this might be a much more complex process that the board receives it, then it goes to the subcommittee, and then the subcommittee reviews it, and they schedule it, and then they goes back to the board, and the board finally approves it. So it could even take more than a month. My personal story is that when we purchased with my husband our first co-op apartment, we had to wait over 3 months for our co-op interview to be scheduled. It was because the building had a new incoming board, and they were figuring out nobody in the board done this type of role ever before, and they were figuring out what's their role, what they need to do, what is their mandate, what they are authorized to do. So it was nothing to do with us, with our attorney, with our package. It was just a new board starting they mandate, and it took them 3 months to give the first interview date.
Sort of bad timing for you there with just buying right at the transition point, huh?
Right.
That's unfortunate. Yeah, an experienced board would probably schedule it a lot quicker, and I'm sure they're better at it. First time doing anything, but I'm sure when they met you, they just needed about 5 minutes with you, Arcelia.
I remember it differently, but let's stick with that story.
We'll stick with it. Nice. Okay, well, great. I mean, that's really awesome information regarding co-ops. I know you're my co-op queen. So there's nobody that knows more about co-ops in New York City than you. So I'm always learning from you whenever you speak on our podcast too. So it's amazing.
Lived experience.
All right. So now looks like we are at the point in the timeline where we are actually scheduling the closing. We're getting out our calendars. So how does that work? How do we do it?
The easiest way to approach it is when you are approved, you have the right of first refusal, or even you are purchasing a house and everything is cleared. Usually the lender's attorney requires 5 days notice, or the payoff company, so the seller's payoff lender and their attorney or payoff lender, they also require 5 days notice. So the way you have to think about it is that, yes, we can think about the closing date, but that closing date has to be 5 days out from the notice time. In order to identify that closing date, you have to have all the involved parties agree on that day. So think about it. At the closing table, you will have buyer, seller, both the attorneys. You will have lender's attorneys, payoff attorney, title company, title closer. If it's a cooperative apartment, you will have to have the management company. If it's a condominium apartment, you will have to have the management company, the transfer agent. So all these parties have to come to an agreement on the same date, same time, and location. So when you have it, you lock it in, and then you send out confirmation email to everyone involved. This is the date, this is the time, and that's when we start preparing for closing. Anything to add, Dalia?
Oh, I always have something to add when it comes to the closing day because I've learned my lessons in that regard. So, like you said, once we have sent the closing confirmation, now everyone's got to be there. And I always just advise, whether I represent the seller or the buyer, bring your photo IDs. Bring 2 if you can. I don't know if your bank or your title company is going to require 2 forms of photo ID, which one of them could be your BJ's card or your Costco card, honestly, sometimes. But I don't know. But I don't want to be caught with our pants down at the table there with that. If you are the seller, bring your keys, bring your manuals, your remote for the garage, bring your IDs, bring your checkbooks. I tell both parties, even though the seller doesn't really understand why they would need to bring that check. Just bring it. You just never know. There might be something in the garage that you caught them putting for sale that you want to write a check for that day. Who knows? Just everyone be there, be on time, be prepared. If your name is on the contract, you must be at that table. That I cannot emphasize enough. Yeah, that's really all I had to add for that. And if there's nothing else, then I would love to thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Rock the Closing. This was a quick sort of run through of the timeline. And if you listen to some of our other episodes, we get really into detail about the specifics of some of these sections. We get more into detail about what the processes are getting to the closing table. We'll just thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you again and speaking to you again, and you listening to us on the next episode of Rock the Closing.
Thank you for tuning in to Rock the Closing. This podcast is hosted by real estate attorneys who offer valuable insights. Please remember that the content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Always consult a qualified professional before making any decisions. This podcast is copyrighted by Rock the Closing, and any reproduction, syndication, or rebroadcasting of the content requires written permission.